Okay, we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat, and today's guest is dark fantasy author D. William Landsborough, and we're here to discuss his Shadows Advent series. And I'll turn it over to him now and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, and thanks for having me on here. I'm D. William Landsborough, or most people just call me Doug. When they get to know me, I'm the author of two books now, as of Thursday, Archangel and Revelations, both part of the Shadows Advent series. And like you mentioned, they're both dark fantasy. They take place about 10 years or so from our modern day, and that's after the war between heaven and hell erupted on Earth. And by taking place 10 years later, we've learned that hell won that war. And so Archangel starts with the Archangel Uriel descending from heaven. He's one of the last ones to descend and breaking through some black clouds that have covered the earth and severed the earth from heaven and the angels that are still here. And he arrives in a completely different world. And so the book's really all about him navigating that world, finding help where he can, and just trying to figure out what exactly an archangel can do on an earth that has now been claimed by demons. And yeah, so that's Archangel. And Revelations came out just 2 days ago on the 10th. And it takes place right at the end of Archangel. So I can't say too much or else it becomes a spoiler, but it takes place right in the middle of a war. That's where we start up, and things take a little bit of a bad turn for our protagonists.
Well, it sounds like a fun series. It sounds like it might also appeal to supernatural fans too a little bit.
Yes.
Um, so, what were your inspirations for writing the series?
It's a little bit of both, and it's funny you mentioned Supernatural. I can't get through an interview without me mentioning Supernatural, because I
That's
grew up on
that's
it.
good because I'm a big fan. So.
I haven't I'm a big fan. I just haven't had cable for the last few years, so I didn't get to watch this last season, and I'm just watching it now, which I'm very excited about, and also fearing the end of it, because it doesn't feel like it should end. But I've been watching it since it came out on TV, like, episode one. And back then when it came out, I think I was just maybe the beginning of high school. Like, I was young. I was 12, 13 years old. And so I've really grown up with the show. And it was really in those first couple seasons, the first 4 seasons, I think, where you had that angel demon dichotomy. And that was really interesting to me, in addition to watching all these horror movies that I really liked, like The Exorcist or The Exorcism of Emily Rose, or anything with demons in it. And I got a real fascination for that area. Now, I wasn't particularly religious myself, or I'm still not, but I thought that all the research and the writing that's been done for theological studies and religious studies, there's so much there. There's such great stories. And so I'm like, what if I take some of those really cool characters and stories that people have already worked on and make them my own, and then, hey, the bad guys won, and let's start from there. Let's see where we can go.
Yeah. So, what kind of research did you do for this series? It sounds because I mean I did a little myself for a short story I wrote, so it is fascinating.
Yeah, it's less so, I think, when I do my research, less so the stories that have been told already, though you can do great retellings of those. I really looked at what kind of angels do we have out there. Like, let's start with the names. Okay, what do they do? What were they known for? Same thing with the demons. There's a surprising amount of research into, like, the hierarchy of demons and hell, and I thought it was just really interesting to go in and say, okay, we say that this creature does this, and how can I make that into an action-packed dark fantasy novel? How can I kind of take those elements and make them relatable, or give them flaws, or make them interesting to the reader? And so our main character, Uriel, I definitely took the idea of Uriel, the archangel from religion, and played with that. And then Chandra, who's our second main character, she's a half demon, a Cambion, and wanted to play with that as well. How does this archangel and this thing that's a half demon, how do they work together? And there's not a whole lot of information out there about that kind of interaction, because that would never happen in that kind of study. But but it was cool. That's where I really got to experience the fun of writing, with playing with that.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your main characters. What are they like? Their flaws, their best traits.
Absolutely. So Uriel, our main character, he's an archangel, so he's very powerful and one of the most powerful in heaven, um, or at least what remains of heaven's ranks now that the war has been lost. And from the outset, I wanted to make him strong because it's a fantasy novel. I want that strong character, but I didn't want to make him too strong. One of the things I say to people every now and then is that I didn't want him to be like Superman. I didn't want him to just, or fly to the situation, land, beat up the bad guys, everyone's good, then he takes off and, he's just spouting morals the whole time. I like Superman, don't get me wrong, but I wanted him to be a little more complex than that. So Uriel, he's very optimistic. He has a lot of faith, but he does have the literal fire of God in him, and that makes him quick to anger or quick to action when one of his friends or someone that he loves has been hurt, and that comes up in Archangel and in Revelations. And that's really his biggest flaw. And at the same time, he's struggling with his faith in his Father, in God, because he's in the middle of a world that has lost the war that they were supposed to win. He's now on an earth that's filled with demons, and angels are getting killed and humans are subjugated, and that's not the way it was supposed to go. So that's what he's struggling with. And then Chandra, our other main character, she's struggling first of all with her identity. She's a half demon, half human, half demon, and doesn't really belong to either side. Humans don't really like her because she's half demon. Half demons, they'll torture or kill her. And even with angels, they very much don't like her because of that demonic side to her. But she has a human twin sister. And so as a Cambion, she's kind of grown up being that protector of her human twin sister. And that has really made her character develop and grow in ways that not a lot of even angels have, which I think adds an extra layer to her.
Okay, so how does that work, being a half demon and a human twin?
It's not a spoiler, so I guess I can dive into it. But essentially, their mother was carrying these twins and would have died from the childbirth. But then an angel came along and said, I can either save them, or I can save you and the kids will be born, but they'll both be half demons, or I can try and purify them and make them human, but then I can't save you. And so her mom ended up dying through childbirth, but because the angels were losing the war and because they were cut off from heaven, the purification only worked on one of the kids. So Chandra born a half demon, her sister Elena born a full human.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about the antagonists. I'm assuming that there's more than one.
Yep, absolutely. And especially one of my antagonists, I absolutely adore. But obviously the antagonists that come first to mind are the demons. You have the legions of hell all over the planet running the show. And so when Uriel lands, he learns that he's in the territory owned by the demon Bodis. And so that's really where he sets his sight. We have to defeat Bodis, let's get a foothold, and we'll move on from there. But we quickly learn that Bodis reports to an even higher ranking demon, Abaddon. And at the same time, our antagonist that keeps popping up is a human named Dante. And he has actually been trained by demons to kill angels. And he has this hatred for angels that isn't necessarily apparent as to why until the second book. But Dante, as my antagonist, I try to give him a lot of screen time, and I try to make him very complex and relatable as well, because I think that makes a good villain. And I remember it was last year, maybe, I think late 2019, someone tweeted at me saying that they read the book, they enjoyed it, and they were hashtag Team Dante. And I remember just having the biggest, goofiest smile on my face. I'm like, first of all, someone used a hashtag. Second of all, someone likes the antagonist so much that they want to be on that team. And I'm like, okay, something's going well there. But Dante has this burning hatred of angels, and so he really does all that he can to kill the angels that he comes across, and has gone through some grueling punishment and I want to say modifications at the hands of demons to put him kind of on their level. And I really like my villain.
Oh, he sounds cool. So, what was the hardest scene or type of scene for you to write in the series so far?
That was, well, there were a couple. So Chandra being a half demon, no human willingly sleeps with a demon. So her mom was sexually assaulted, which led to her birth, which is a big part of the book. And so trying to do that, trying to convey that scene appropriately or convey what happened appropriately and delicately with the respect that it deserves was like, it was a very dark scene to write. And so I tried to navigate that with making it as well written and appropriate as I could. So that one was pretty tough. And then there is, again, I can't say this explicitly because of spoilers, but there is one character death that went to a pretty dark place as well. That, yeah, it's tough to say. I'm trying to phrase it in a way that's not going to spoil it, but there's one death, and people will know in Archangel if they read to it what that death is. It's about halfway through the book. And then there is as well, because it's dark fantasy, there are some instances of torture. And I don't think that I'm a writer that wants to explicitly write torture. So I had to say, you know, how do we have this scene where I don't want to show someone actively being tortured, but I need to convey the impact that they have been put through a lot of physical and mental pain for somebody to get to a goal that they want. So that one was tough too. All these dark places that are difficult to write, but they really pay off in fleshing out the book.
Okay, so what was your favorite scene or type of scene to write?
That's a wonderful question too. In Archangel, my favorite scene to write, I think I have two. I'm pretty sure it's chapter 7 in Archangel, where Chandra takes Uriel essentially on a tour of Bodis's city. And Uriel, he's been in heaven for the last 10 years, so he hasn't been on the ground understanding what's been going on as the demons have taken control of the planet. And so he sees firsthand, and very shocking to him, how marketplaces have changed. How there's one stall that's just selling meat, but you see like a severed arm for sale, or there are monsters that are killing each other and wandering free on the streets. There are people beating each other up for change because humans are so desperate in this situation. So just kind of really taking that scene to build out this city and how much it's changed was definitely one of my favorite ones. And then there was another scene in Archangel where they go into an asylum that's been converted to a prison. So that's not much of a conversion, but while they're in there are these monsters, these angel killers that really stick to the shadows, and they manipulate darkness to try and attack the angels. And it is just kind of a chilling, tense scene. And I really like that about that particular one.
Okay, so do you have any quirky secondary characters that tend to steal the scenes?
That's a that's a good question. I feel like I'm saying that after every question. I've been told a couple times that I have this one character, Raquiel, who is a very stoic angel. He doesn't show his emotions. He doesn't, joke around with the others, because a lot of the angels that have been stuck on Earth have adopted a different mentality than what they had when they were in heaven, when they thought they were all powerful. They become, a little more human. But Raquiel is all business, no pleasure. But the way that comes across usually has a little quirkiness that has made more than one person tell me that he's their favorite character, which is fun.
Okay, so what are your characters afraid of?
Oh, so Uriel would definitely be most afraid of losing his faith, I'd say. A combination of either losing his faith or losing those that he has sworn to protect. And throughout Archangel and Revelations, we see him struggling with this. And it's the biggest driving factor to make him push his own limits and his own boundaries to actually maintain that faith or save the people around him. Um, then at the same time, Chandra, her biggest fear would be being alone. She's been isolated all her life, except for her sister, and she had an adoptive father, an angel that was looking after them after they were born, but he was killed. So it was just her and her sister, and her biggest fear is definitely being alone and not having anyone to navigate the world with.
Okay, so what about Dante? What's he afraid of?
Dante, as we learn, he has a lot of trauma, um, because his during the onset of the war, his wife and his children died, and he largely blames the angels for not being able to save them, and that's one of the motivators behind him trying to exact revenge on them. And so it's gotten to a point in his development, in his journey, trying to find revenge, that is not even loss or being alone that he's afraid of anymore. It's more he fears not being able to exact that revenge. If it gets to a point where he will not be able to do that, I think that's the scariest thing for him.
Okay, so obviously you write fantasy, but are there any other genres you like to try your hand at?
Absolutely. There's a couple, and especially this coming year, I want to try my hand at horror. And I'm in a horror writing class right now, until the first week of January, I believe. And I really enjoy horror movies, a good ghost story, and just the atmosphere that's created by that. So, a very different writing style, but I'm really excited to try my hand at that. And I also eventually want to try my hand at sci-fi, but not like intergalactic sci-fi. I don't think that I have the story in mind for that, but more like a climate sci-fi, I guess, was what it would be. The idea that I have in my head is kind of a near future one, but it's not nearly fleshed out enough for me to say anything meaningful about it. Um, but that's something that I have in mind, and I think urban fantasy is just something that I write for fun that hasn't been refined into anything sellable yet. But that's definitely in there. And urban fantasy for me, the Sandman Slim books were the first urban fantasy that I read, and they're just snarky, sarcastic, go go go. I don't think in the Sandman Slim books there are actually any chapters. It's all just broken up into scenes every now and then, and so I'll start reading it, and it just, the pace is so good, and urban fantasy is just such a fun genre that I find myself plowing through the book, and I'm like, I really want to write a fun story like this. I already write fantasy. Let's plop it in the modern world. But I think that's a little ways off too. Horror is definitely the next one I want to go into.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we have a lot to look forward to you too from you. Okay, apparently my language skills died today. So anyway, so I think we'll wrap it up here, and I'll let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Absolutely. So you can find me at my website. Is probably the best place to start. Is D Landsborough, DLANDSBOROUGH .com. My books are for sale on Amazon and ebook available almost everywhere. Whether you read Kobo, Kindle, or even PDF, you can find it in most retailers. And connect with me on social media. On Facebook, I'm D. William Landsborough. On everywhere else, I'm at DW Landsborough for character limit reasons. Uh, and yeah, just connect with me there. I have a lot of fun on social media. Just yesterday, we did a virtual book launch, where we did a whole bunch of Q&A. We did a little bit of reading. We opened a new bottle of whiskey that I got just for the book coming out, and it was just a good time. So yeah, feel free to connect with me there.
Okay, so thank you for coming here today. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you for
And
having me.
and the Between the Pages will be back tomorrow with another author, so join us then.